world because we promised them a dollar would equal a dollar of gold. Then we changed. When we got rid of gold, we said it's going to be the Petro Dollar. And it's a deal we made with Saudi Arabia that oil could only be purchased in U.S. dollars. Okay, so everybody had to hold those dollars because if you wanted oil, it could only be purchased in U.S. dollars. So they kept all of our money into the banks. All the sovereigns kept, gold, fat chance, and dollars in their banks. And that's how the world works. Once the dollar is over, rocky, can be replaced, believe me, it will be. So the international system is maintained by several dollar-dominated organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization. So when we went into Ukraine, there was one action by the West that changed and accelerated absolutely everything. Everything. It was the dollar-dominated system. It took hundreds of billions of dollars held by the Russians and made it go poof. We ghosted hundreds of billions of dollars. Now imagine if Saudi Arabia or China or anybody did that to us. If we were holding all of their money, and I'm going to show you how it's going to happen with China soon because of people like BlackRock and what they're doing with investments in China. But imagine billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars just disappear overnight because China says we no longer agree with you. But imagine if it wasn't in the stock market, it was actually dollars that were held instead of gold. And the promise was it will always be worth the price of gold. So China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, remember, we don't have a gold-backed dollar. We now have a Petro Dollar. Saudi Arabia, part of it, they're like, you know what? I think we should get out of the dollar business. Well, that's easy to say, harder to do, okay? First, what they had to do was start to decouple from the entire thing. And the Axis powers already had this in works. Iran announced that they're now officially ditching the dollar in trade, and their growing ally now is Russia. They also announced similar trade plans with China, India, and Turkey. Iran, Russia, and Turkey. So you know, that has never happened before, and that is literally what the Bible in end-time Revelation refers to as Gog and Magog, the coalition, if you will, that is the coalition of the Antichrist. Gog and Magog, that is Iran, Russia, and modern-day Turkey. They met last month, and they all but admitted a new anti-American alliance that they call, quote, the Axis of Good. I would say it's the axis of evil. But remember, in a time where all good is made to be bad and all bad is made to be good, they're calling themselves the axis of good. As the Western G nations met in June, another economic and military pact was meeting nearly simultaneously. It was the BRICS summit that nobody strangely was really covering or paying attention to. BRICS is composed of BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's just 5 countries, but the potential is massive. Each country has participation in their own individual trade blocs. For instance, Brazil is part of the South American Free Trade Area, which has 11 members. Russia is part of the European Economic Union, the trade area, with 8 members. India, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, 8 members. China has their own partnership with 15 members. South Africa has a trade agreement with 34 member states. Now, I point this out because this axis is a juggernaut. It could become a juggernaut and hostile to the U.S. dollar really fast. So at the beginning of the BRICS summit, President Xi was there, and he declared that the West was, quote, weaponizing the world's economy. We were. Everything we do, if you don't agree with what the West is saying, particularly America, we'll cut you off. Well, that's not really a stable system. So they got together and at the BRICS summit, they laid out 75 points. And here's what President Xi was saying. He urged people in the West to read it. Now, why would he do that? Because he wants you to know exactly what's coming. For the economic axis of evil or good to replace the dollar international system, they must first find a way to operate outside of the IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. And the dollar is the last one. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. These are the ones that, kind of settle debts and work together and decide who's going to, get some bailouts, who's not. The WTO is the Western Trade Agreement, and then the dollar is the one that everybody uses. Points 37 and 38 are about, quote, enhancing cooperation on supply chains between BRICS countries and their partners. And it goes into specifics, but it's clear what this is about. They're going to replace the World Trade Organization. Point 39 talks about a, quote, new development bank that has just been opened in Shanghai. That's their solution to both the World Bank and the IMF. Point 49 talks about the new intra-BRICS trade system that can make transactions within their group. What does that mean? Do you remember when we kicked the world off of SWIFT? We'll get them now. They won't be able to make transactions because we're the only one with a system that can make those interbank and intercountry transactions. We're going to kick them off of SWIFT. There's a new intra-BRICS trade system that will do what SWIFT used to do. The last thing is to ditch the dollar. And they can completely circumvent Western sanctions. But it also will mean that half the world will dump their dollars. You think there's inflation now? Wait until half of the countries of the world no longer need to use the dollar, no longer believe it's worth its weight in gold, and just dump them. Putin said directly, right out in the open during the BRICS summit, they are telling us what they're going to do. They are urging us to pay attention. And we are so arrogant that we are not taking it seriously. Everything I pointed out to all of those friends and economists that I've talked to over the last 20 years, that the dollar is going to be dethroned. And they said, no, because there's no other system. You don't understand. And I said, I understand the free market and humans enough to know there's a point of no return where people say, you know what? It's not worth it. Let's build something else and then clobber the dollar. That will never happen. Well, I've lived in a point of history where I've seen too many things that cannot happen. By the way, if you have to live under this system, which we will, all of this goes through, I want you to know this. Brazil is the world's second largest soy producer. Russia is the largest wheat producer. South Africa is top 10 in corn. China has a quarter of the world's grain. India is number 2 in rice. You add Saudi Arabia and we're done. What is it we're doing? We should be reinforcing. We should be unleashing our energy producers. We should be unleashing our farmers. There's new stories out today that 75% of the farmers and ranchers either sold off a good portion of their cattle for slaughter, and if they were growing crops, A third of it they plowed under. We should be going the opposite direction. We are regulating and squeezing our own people and then pissing off the rest of the world. Prepare for impact because it will come. It's not a conspiracy theory. It is not insane. Russia and China are doing it now.